Okay, another awesome video here. Today it's about the reciprocal, or another term that we can use to describe it is multiplicative inverse. You'll usually hear me just say reciprocal, and here's what the reciprocal is. It's a pretty easy concept. Let's just say you have the number 5. Okay, now 5 right there is an integer, and we can turn the integer into a fraction by just putting it over 1. And the multiplicative inverse is when you want to get your product to be 1, you just multiply it by the reciprocal, which is just 5 over 1. So basically you just flip the number. So you just flip the number. So if it is just a whole number or an integer that's not in a fraction form, you turn it into a fraction and you just multiply by 1. And just a quick little refresher, when we are multiplying fractions, we have 5 times 1/5, and we can do this two ways. We can multiply the numerators, 5, and we multiply the denominators, 5, and then that just simply simplifies to 1. Another thing that you can do is we have 5 over 1 times 1/5, and there's something that's called cross canceling, and it's not cross multiplication that you do with your proportions, but if the numbers across from each other have same factors, in fact 5 does, because both of them have a factor of 5 goes into both of these once, and then 1 can't be simplified anymore, and that would just be the same as 1 over 1, which is just still equal to 1. So that's reciprocal. Why is reciprocals important? Well, remember, when you multiply, it becomes 1. So if we are solving equations, I'm going to just do this one right now. When it comes to a simple equation like this, we need to isolate our variable, and our variable in this case here is just x. So what I like to always do is just kind of highlight that. So I have to isolate it, so I have to get rid of the 3/4. Well, backtracking a little bit ago, we learned that if we have just the variable x, that's the same as saying 1x, because we are multiplying the coefficient by the variable, and if that's 1, it doesn't change the value at all. So up here, I need to isolate the variable, and this just goes with what you learned about solving equations in previous years, is you want to get the variable by itself. Well, to get the variable by itself, I can't subtract it, because it's this right here is 3/4 times x. So the inverse is essentially to divide, but one way to divide is to also multiply by the inverse. So I am going to just multiply that by 4 over 3 on both sides. Okay, so what that does is, like I showed you with the cross canceling, that crosses off this, that crosses at this crosses off here, because 4 goes into 4 once, 3 goes into 3 once, so that leaves me with 1x, which we can just simply just write as x, and then we got to just come over here and do our multiplication. Now to multiply, we got to do our numerator by our denominator, so I'm going to just change that 12 into 12 over 1. And because of cross canceling, I know my multiples of 3, 12 is part of it, or I know my factors, 1 and 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12 are my factors. So I know 3 goes into 3 once, and 3 goes into 12 4 times, and then I just have to multiply that, so that would be 16. So I know down here, x equals 16. And we can always go ahead and go check that. So I'm going to take my original statement is 3/4 x, and now we know x is 16, so I'm going to put that as a 16 there, equals, and we know the answer here was 12, so if I do this, both sides should equal. Well, when we have parentheses next to one another like that, that's multiplication, and I'm going to again change this into a 1, because then it's easier to multiply the numerators by the denominators. And again, with my cross canceling, I can just say 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into 16 4 times, 3 times 4 is 12, and that's over 1, which just equals 12, and then that is also 12, so therefore we got a correct answer. So that's why we have to learn how to understand our reciprocal, and then cross multiplication is a good tool to have when you get into fractions within your equations, because then that will just simplify things. If not, you would have gone the long way. You would have done 3 times 16, then just divide by 4, and that would still equal 12. Excuse me. So if you have any questions about this, make sure you come talk to me. We'll go over this in class. So this is just a review. There's always a bunch of YouTube videos on reciprocal, or again, the fancy word is multiplicative inverse. And to recap again, that's just simply taking a fraction and just flipping it. And when you have that, the original number and the reciprocal, when you multiply it, your value will equal 1. Thank you. Have a good day.